This video is sponsored by Cascade Presets. They are my own preset pack for Adobe Lightroom, and they work well on everything from landscapes to portraits to families to weddings, all of that good stuff. So if you like some of the samples you see in this video later on, you can check them out in the description down below. A couple months back, I took a trip down to Palm Springs last minute to photograph a wedding for a friend of mine who wasn't able to make it out of New Zealand. And I had an extra day to kind of hang out and walk around. And so just decided to, leave the hotel room around dusk and make some images on the Q2 Monochrom. You can see these last two are at 64,000 ISO. And so part of this is going to be just some walk around testing, but I have decided to toss the information down below to my shutter speed and ISO and f-stop and everything like that. So you can get a good idea of, how the camera performs in all of these scenarios. And then obviously all of these photos are processed with my Cascade presets. Things on a monochrome camera are a little bit different, but having some of the tone curve things and whatnot still ended up being really, really useful in making an image that I found to be really interesting. And so if you're interested in those, obviously I'll put a link down below. And obviously, as videos like this aren't exactly the norm for my channel, if you do enjoy these, please leave a comment down below and let me know about that, or if I'm wasting my time. I find these really interesting, and I love watching them from other people. So obviously a comment, like on the video would be super helpful as a way to, I guess, support the channel and hopefully be able to see more of this stuff from me moving forward. So for those of you who've been interested in the Q2 Monochrome, I have a separate video specifically just kind of reviewing the camera and talking about a lot of its features and whatnot that you can check out in the link above. And as well, you saw me take on and off that red filter, and I did a whole video just buying some cheap colored filters and doing some tests and just getting an idea of what those filters do in a black and white image. And I will also link that above in case you're interested in checking it out. And then also one of the other things you may have noticed was some very high ISO photos at like 25,000 ISO, as well as some photos that were taken at very low shutter speeds, around 1/8 of a second, to get some of that motion blur. So I want to jump into Lightroom real quick, and I know this was more of like a get out and walk about video, but one of the things I didn't do in the full review necessarily was dive as much into the image quality, and I feel like that is something that's pretty interesting. So one of the nights I was there by myself, I was just in a drive-through line waiting, and I had the camera, so I thought I would just kind of see what the images looked like. This is at ISO 10,000, and we're at 100% crop, and it just looks so clean. It's crazy. So we're moving from 10,000 to 25,000 ISO, which is definitely not something my other cameras can do. And while you can definitely see some grain, especially into the corners and some of the transitions and whatnot, it is more than acceptable in my opinion. And I mean, there's less grain at 25,000 ISO on this camera than, you know, shooting Tri-X 400 in daylight. So especially, you know, zooming into 46.7 megapixels. And here we go up to 50,000 ISO, which again is pretty ridiculous. One of the things that I start to see at some points in these, I don't know if you can see it and it's coming through that well. Another thing you can see is like where the vignette correcting is trying to happen right there. It's boosting up these shadows that don't exist. You know, there's just not any information there. But overall, I mean, we're at 50,000 ISO and it looks pretty darn good. And then moving from 50,000 to 100,000, you can see kind of in these corners and whatnot where, again, those lens corrections are taking effect a little bit too much with the vignetting. And especially when you zoom in on like this, you can see some of these weird patterns showing up where, you know, the software, either in the camera or in Lightroom, I'm obviously not sure, but is trying to push the image. That being said, if those things are fixable, which I'm not sure if they are or not, this is without a preset applied or anything, this is just what the image looks like. I feel like you could take down some of the shadows and whatnot in here and make this grain totally work. You know, especially at this, you know, at like a 4K resolution right here, other than the lens correction stuff, it looks pretty darn good at 100,000 ISO. And then sort of last here, this image was taken at f8 at 1/8 of a second. So one of the things I wanted to do is kind of just zoom in and see what the detail's actually looking like. Obviously you can see just this guy riding his bike fairly slowly through the scene is completely blurred out. The cars here are pretty blurred out, but combining a 28mm lens with image stabilization, there's a lot of detail still going on in this image. And if we pull back and take that preset and everything off, you know, and making it less of a stylized kind of thing, you can just see how much detail there is. I've definitely used my M cameras at 1/8 of a second before and gotten results that I was like okay with, sort of, but definitely nowhere near this kind of image detail and whatnot at 1/8 of a second. So I feel like a super unutilized, or I guess not talked about feature is that image stabilization on the Q2 Monochrome. So thanks so much for watching. Check out those other two videos if you're interested in more about this camera. Subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment below if you've made it this far and if videos like this are interesting or helpful for you. So thanks again, and I will see you all on the next one.